What's up, everybody? And happy 420. That's right, today is April 20th, 2022. And welcome back to this edition of the Super Stream. A lot on the plate for today. We'll be going about an hour or 90 minutes or so, talking about a number of news stories from the past week. Big major news stories, the deaths of a couple of celebrities, hockey players. Also, the death of the son of Cristiano Ronaldo will be a topic in this video. We're going to start off by talking about the sinking of this Russian warship called the Moskva, which is, of course, named after the capital city of Moscow, and how this was sank by some Neptune missiles from the Ukrainian army. And a big news story I want to cover towards the end of this video. It might be one of the strongest numerical connections here, but it's a really long, drawn-out decode. It's connected to the old Queen of Hungary, the Queen Consort, Elizabeth. And this story comes out of Queens, New York, just shy of Queen Elizabeth's 96th birthday. And of course, Queens, New York, summing to 96 in the reverse alphabetic order. Now, this is a pretty big story, and we'll talk about it, but I want to talk about a few things that lead up into it first, and a number of other synchronistic elements that tie to topics I've been talking about on this channel. So for anyone who still happens to be new to this topic, we talk about the language of Gematria, the ancient practice of observing and coding numbers into the language. The most basic ciphers, which are the common ones we use, English ordinal and the reduction methods, simply number the alphabet 1 through 26 with the reduction or Pythagorean method, dropping each double-digit number to a single digit. Of course, these methods can be reversed. This concocts the 4 base ciphers. And we'll also take a look at the extended or large number ciphers as we go along as well. So let's start off by talking about the sinking of the Russian Moskva, which is said to be the largest sinking of a warship since the early 1980s. So, interestingly enough, the last video on this channel talked about the death of Gilbert Gottfried. And of course, all you got to do is go to my videos and see my decode on the death of this comedian. Now, the big piece of that riddle is that Gottfried died on the date of a conjunction between the planets of Jupiter and Neptune, a rare astrological event which only occurs about once every 13 years. Furthermore, this conjunction was in the sign of Pisces, which is the sign that both those planets rule, Jupiter in traditional astrology, Neptune in modern. Curiously enough, the man who first saw the planet Neptune through a telescope was named Johann Gottfried Galle, a man who shares the same name with Gilbert. In the reverse Sumerian cipher, Johann Gottfried Galle sums to 2022, like the year that Gilbert Gottfried died. News outlets were telling us that it was a long illness that killed Gilbert. Well, the phrase long illness has a perfect gematria overlap with the word conjunction in all 4 base methods, which I just went over. There was a little bit more to this as well. Consider how Gilbert Gottfried was born on February 28th, or 2/28. He died 2 months and 28 days before the anniversary of Johann Gottfried Galle's death. Furthermore, this 2/28 is found in the gematria of Urbain Le Verrier, the man who gave Gottfried Galle the coordinates for Neptune when he first saw it. So the reason this ties into this story about the sinking of the Russian Moskva is because the type of missiles that the Ukrainian Navy used to sink the ship were called R-360 Neptune missiles. And again, this ship sank literally the same day I made that video on Gilbert Gottfried. What makes this particularly interesting is the number they use in the name of these missiles, 360. As we just mentioned, this all occurred on the date of a conjunction, and this astrological graph here is made up of 360 degrees. Measuring from the date that the Neptune missiles were first tested back in 2016 to the date of the sinking was a span of 2,216 days. The date of the news was also 20 years and 216 days after September 11th. And these digits, 2216, I talked a lot about these in a previous super stream, where I talked about Revelation 2216, which talks about the morning star, which is, of course, Venus. This verse in Revelation has reverse gematria of 2022, again, like the year we're in. Barack Obama, who has a litany of matching gematria with Venus and the morning star, was 22,160 days old when he visited the White House a couple weeks ago. This number was also part of the ritual with the Will Smith slap of Chris Rock. The 2,216th prime number. I'm so used to saying 3-digit numbers, when we come across these 4-digit number matches. So it's a lot to digest. And here we see Barack Obama syncing up with the morning star, planet Venus matching the morning star in Gematria. So we've been seeing a lot of astrological rituals in the media lately, and this is indeed one of them. Notice how the planet Venus has matching 81 and 18 Gematria with Moskva, the name of the ship that was sunk. What made this particularly interesting, though, is that news of this sinking hit the headlines here in America on April 15th. And in history, April 15th is famously the date that the Titanic sank. The sinking of this Russian warship fell exactly 110 years after the sinking of the RMS Titanic. In our standard reduction method, sinking of the RMS Titanic equals 110. Now, the number 110, significant in the history of World War. Today, April 20th, happens to be the birthday of Adolf Hitler, the German Führer. Notice how the name Adolf Hitler equals 110, born on the 110th day of the year. Earlier I mentioned how this was all connected to the September 11th attacks, which were also allegedly an act of war. The number 110 is significant to 9/11 as well. Think about how the two World Trade Center buildings were both 110 stories each. The North Tower even had a 110-meter antenna on top of it. And there's some remarkable alignments here. September 11th is the 254th day of the year. In Russian gematria, the name of the ship equals 254. The World Trade Center began construction in 1968. The name of this missile, when spelled out, equals 1968 in our Latin or Jewish method. But check this out. Measuring from the release of the Xbox game called Battleship, which was named after the film, it was exactly 9 years and 11 months, or 119 months between the release of this Battleship game and the sinking of this Russian battleship. In Gematria, the word battleship sums to 158. The Neptune missiles were last tested exactly 158 weeks before sinking this battleship. And of course, 158 weeks is also 1,106 days. That's an upside down 9/11. This makes sense, right? Collapsing towers, sinking ships, acts of war, all falling together. What brings this all together, though, is this 666 coding. Vladimir Putin is very synonymous with the number 636. His name has matching gematria with this biblical phrase. Of course, the number 110 has reduction gematria of 66 and 60, part of this 666 code. On the date of this sinking, Vladimir Putin had been in office for 119 months and 7 days. So not only do we have the 119, like how September 11th would be written in Russia, but this 1197 is the Jewish value of 666. And the name Russian cruiser Moskva sums to 275 in the standard alphabetic order. That's the same number as 666 when spelled out. Moscow, Russia has gematria of 666 in the Fibonacci cipher. Missiles equals 666 in reverse Sumerian. This happened in the Black Sea, which equals 666 using square numbers. And the ship sank on the 14th of April. A lot like 14/4, 144. Mark of the beast equals 144. And consider how the number 144,000 is mentioned 4 different times in the book of Revelation. Number of the beast gives us gematria of 174. And this ship sank 1,074 weeks after 9/11. You may recall this number in the Gilbert-Gottfried decode, right? We talked about how that was all connected to Neptune, the type of missile that sank the ship. Well, Gilbert-Gottfried's full name equals those same exact digits, 1704, and he died exactly 1,074 weeks after 9/11. So this incident, certainly part of the theater that's going on in Ukraine right now. It's hard to gauge exactly what percentage of what we're seeing is theater and how much of it is real, but as always, I would venture to guess that most of it, the vast majority of what we're seeing play out, is just theater. It's the next step of the fear state to keep people always thinking about world wars, nuclear attacks, all these other things that keep them in a low vibrational, consumer-based state. All right. Now, before I get into this decode on Jackie Robinson Day, because that will tie us into this story from Queens, New York, this woman, Orsolia Gal, found on Jackie Robinson Parkway. So I want to save this for a little bit. There's a couple of hockey players who died this past week. And I want to touch on the numerology here, because one of these players connects to a story I was just talking about in my last Super Stream. So on my channel, there's a video that says 3 NFL deaths during the Masters, made one day before my Gottfried video, or 2 days maybe. Either way, this Super Stream talks at length about how those deaths were connected to Dallas Cowboys head coach Mike McCarthy. Let's pull Mike up here on Wikipedia. And a lot of this had to do with the fact that the winner of the Masters, Scottie Scheffler, went to the same high school as NFL quarterback Matthew Stafford, who won this past year's Super Bowl. That high school was in the city of Dallas, where Mike McCarthy won a Super Bowl with the Green Bay Packers in 2011, and the city where he now coaches the Cowboys. So how strange is it that just a couple days after making this video about Mike McCarthy and how all these people are dying connected to him, we get the death of a former North Stars all-star winger named Tom McCarthy. Now, Tom McCarthy played most of his career with the Minnesota North Stars. You'll see him here featured in his Minnesota North Stars jersey. Now, the North Stars no longer exist in the NHL. They have since moved to the city of Dallas, and they're just now called the Stars. And think about how this connects to Mike McCarthy, the coach of Dallas who wears a star on his head. Now, since Tom McCarthy left the team and since Minnesota left the state, Minnesota has a new hockey team called the Wild. And the day after Tom McCarthy died, the Dallas Stars played against the Minnesota Wild. I mean, what are the odds of that? This game occurred on the 14th of the month. Tom McCarthy died a day earlier, which was a date with 14 numerology. And the reason this number 14 is so significant here is because of how it connects in Gematria to Minnesota North Stars. Notice how Minnesota North Stars sums to 1004 in what I consider to be the most important large number cipher. It also sums to 1414 in English Gematria. On top of that, stars simply equals 14. Now, if you take 14 squared, you get the number 196. And Tom McCarthy was born in the year 1960, which represents those same digits. The cause of death given for Tom McCarthy is an aortic aneurysm, which curiously sums to this same 196 value. I'm always suspicious when there's a 1089, especially in Jewish gematria here. 1089 is 33 squared, a number that we like to see stamped into stories about death. But let's look more about the date numerology here for the death of Tom McCarthy. So the day after he died, the Minnesota Wild came to Dallas and defeated the Stars. Minnesota, the team he used to play for. Minnesota Wild sums to 59 in reduction. That's the same value as Tom McCarthy in reverse, or just the name Thomas McCarthy in standard reduction. His death fell on a date with numerology of 59 and 17. And of course, 59 is the 17th prime number. The word kill sums to 59 in Jewish gematria and 17 in reduction. This man's full name has 1717 gematria. And his birthday was the date leaving 153 days in the year, which is the 17th triangular number. However, we did not learn about this man's death until 3 days later. This was a date with numerology of 17. In this hockey game where the Wild defeated the Stars, Minnesota got their 46th win in their 73rd game of the season. This is connected to the sacrifice code. The word sacrifice sums to 46 in reduction and 73 in ordinal. Meanwhile, this was the Dallas Stars' 74th game of the season, 74, a number connected to killing. And to top that off, Tom McCarthy was 740 months old when he died. There's another very interesting detail about Tom McCarthy. Tom McCarthy is just one of two players drafted ahead of Wayne Gretzky. And of course, Wayne Gretzky is almost unanimously recognized as the greatest hockey player in the history of the game. And how appropriate that the name Wayne Gretzky equals 180, 144, 63, and 54. The phrase hockey player equals 180, 144, 63, and 54. So pretty wild. But what's Wayne Gretzky's full name? Wayne Douglas Gretzky. Notice how this sums to 259 in ordinal. Well, the date that we learned about Tom McCarthy's death, remember this was the 16th here, that was also the 259th day of the year. And this news story fell 259 days after the birthday of Tom McCarthy. If you measure from the birthday of Tom McCarthy to the birthday of Wayne Gretzky, you get 180 days. Remember, this was a number found in both Wayne Gretzky and hockey player. Tom McCarthy died at the age of 61, which is the same age Wayne Gretzky currently is. And 61 is the 18th prime number, connecting to this 180 here. Meanwhile, the 18th triangular number is 171, and Tom McCarthy was born exactly 171 weeks before Mike McCarthy. Now let's look more closely at how this is again connected to Mike McCarthy, particularly through his birthday. Measuring from his date of birth to the death of Tom McCarthy is 154 days, or 211 days before his next birthday. These are important numbers in the sacrifice code. Ritual sacrifice equals 154. Ritual human sacrifice is 211. So we see this very commonly with the 154-211 connection. Think about also how this connects to the calendar. The date that leaves 154 days in the year, which is also the 211th day of the year, is July 30th, written 7/30. And remember, the number 73 connects back to sacrifice, as we talked about earlier. So, indeed, this language coded deeply into the calendar. News of Tom McCarthy's death broke a span of 158 days after the birthday of Mike McCarthy, and 158 is the gematria of both Tom McCarthy and Minnesota Wild. It was also 6 months and 25 days before Mike McCarthy's next birthday, 625 the value of both McCarthy and human sacrifice. There's some more connections between these two men, particularly the number 13. I feel like every week or two I'm talking about how this man, Mike McCarthy, is heavily coded with the number 13. So this is all laid out here. So news of Tom McCarthy's death actually fell just one day after we learned about the death of another NHL legend, Mike Bossy. Mike Bossy, also relatively young for an NHL player, just 65 years old. Over the years of decoding, I've noticed that NHL players seem to live longer than most athletes. I don't know if this has to do with their conditioning, whether the fact that they spend so much time indoors, who knows. Mike Bossy's full name is Michael Dean Bossy, which sums to 65 in our standard reduction method, which is the age he was when he died. And Mike Bossy holds a very clear distinction in the NHL, as he scored 60 goals in a season 5 different times. So again, this is representing the number 65. Bossy was a 4-time Stanley Cup winner for the New York Islanders during their reign of terror in the early 80s. Mike Bossy wore number 22 for his entire career. And that's interesting because he was born on the 22nd day of the year. And now he's gone on to die in the year 2022. He played his whole NHL career in the city of New York, New York, which equals 222. Mike Bossy died 9 months and 8 days before his next birthday. He died in the city of Montreal, which equals 98. And he died of lung cancer, which equals 98. Notice how Cancer also has reverse gematria of 118, which matches Montreal in that same cipher. Well, the name Mike Bossy sums to 118 in the alphabetic order. And let it not be lost the fact that we get the death of Mike Bossy one day before we learned about Tom McCarthy. And again, this is all connected to Mike McCarthy. I mean, could I have been any more right in my video talking about the Masters here? But this isn't about patting myself on the back. Again, this language is really simple to anyone who spends time on it. Some more things I found interesting about the numerology of Mike Bossy here. This man was the 15th pick in the NHL draft, and he died 15 days before the end of the 105th NHL season. And what makes that so interesting is that the date he died is the 105th day of a leap year, and the day we learned about his death was the 105th day of a regular year. News broke on a date with numerology of 61. Again, he spent his whole career with the Islanders, which equals 61. The 61st prime number is 283. Mike Bossy died 283 days before his next birthday. 283, a number connected to this 666 code, which we just talked about, because 666 equals 2083. 666, a big number of the circle. 2083 is the 314th prime number, 314 like pi. Mathematics of the circle, 666. It all comes together way too neatly. Now, the number 666 is recognized as the number of the beast. Notice how beast equals 198. And Mike Bossy and the New York Islanders began their reign of terror over the NHL in the year 1980. Bossy was born in the year 57, which connects to 666 and triple sixes. He spent his whole career with the New York Islanders. New York 666, Islanders 606. New York equals 66. His next birthday would have had numerology of 66, but he died a span of 9 months, 9 days before that, syncing up with his 99 birth numerology. Also, his final Stanley Cup victory, falling after the NHL's 66th season. All right, so we've covered a lot so far. Soon we're going to get to this story on the death of Orsalia Gal, a woman killed in Queens this past weekend. Huge numerical riddle here. But before we get there, I want to quick touch on a couple of other news stories. And these are classic examples of news by the numbers, particularly Amir Khan. Let's talk about this guy here. Boxer Amir Khan was in the news yesterday because it's being reported that he was robbed at gunpoint in London, getting just a watch stolen off his wrist, I guess. Notice how the name Amir Khan has ordinal gematria of 75. This is a story about him getting robbed at gunpoint, which equals 75 in reduction and 750 in Jewish gematria. This robbery was on the 19th. It was on the 18th, which had numerology of 28, a lot like the word robbed. Amir Khan being robbed in London, I knew this was a numeric riddle right away because the mayor of London is named Sadiq Khan. The mayor of London named Khan. So this is really what gave it away. When you write out London, England, you get a gematria value of 131. Amir Khan was robbed in London, England, exactly 131 days after his birthday. Now, if you include the end date, this is actually 132 days. Notice how both London, England and England equal 132. The word robbed equals 132. This boxer's full name equals 116. And notice how his birthday has numerology of 116. The word robbed equals 116. So does the word gunpoint, 116. And I noted these alignments in a post I made last month where the wife of Syracuse head coach Jim Boeheim also had gotten robbed at gunpoint. And notice here I mentioned robbed equals 116 just like gunpoint. And this all connected to Syracuse's next game against the Hurricanes, which equals 116, who had a conference record of 9-11, an upside down 116. And that story was even 1,106 days after her husband killed a guy on the freeway. And measuring between these two stories about being robbed at gunpoint, you get 1 month and 16 days. Again, this connects to the mayor of London, whose name is Khan. And notice how he was 6 months, 11 days after his birthday on the date of this story. But look at how these two men named Khan are connected. Notice how both Sadiq and Amir were each born on the 8th day of a month. Measuring between their birthdays, you find they were born exactly 194 months apart. The mayor's name Sadiq equals 194 in English Gematria. And the date of this news story was 19/4, the 19th of April. Sadiq Khan was born on October 8th, written 10/8. This robbery was on the 108th day of the year. Measuring from the date that Sadiq Khan had taken office to the date of this news story was 71 months and 9 days. Those are the same 3 digits found in the Jewish Gematria of the name Amir Khan, 179. This 719, by the way, is also the 128th prime number, and Amir Khan was born on the date written, 128, 12/8, December 8th. Finally, this news story is also connected to Amir Khan's last fight, which was in February. The name Sadiq Aman Khan sums to 59, just like London, England. And this stands out because Sadiq Khan took office on May 9th, the date written 5/9. Amir Khan was robbed a span of 59 days after his last fight, which was against Kell Brook. Notice how the word theft equals 59 and 219. Well, that's interesting because this fight was on February 19th, the date written 219, and the two men in the fight, Khan and Brook, were born 219 days apart. All right, guys, in the next part of this video, I want to talk about the death of the twin son of Cristiano Ronaldo. Now, this is a curious story because they haven't even disclosed when the twins were born. And it's my strong suspicion that they only really had one kid, that they're simply reporting that they had the death of another one. Again, just to keep people thinking about death, sadness, low vibrational topics. All part of this ongoing plan, so to speak. Now, the name Cristiano is what's important here. Of course, this comes from the word Christian, which is what we call followers of Jesus. And those of you familiar with my work know that I spend a lot of time talking about this eclipse crucifixion code, where the deaths of celebrities or people connected to them are almost always by this code, which is connected to solar eclipses. This traces back to the New Testament, where 3 of the 4 Gospels state that darkness fell over the sky during the crucifixion on Good Friday. Now, this piece of art here, called Christ on the Cross, where his head looks like it's blocking the sun a little bit, right? Well, of course, this is more of a halo effect around the head. But the symbolism remains. You know, we have a dark sky here, an object blocking the light. This painting was created in 1870. And these digits here are super important, 187. Consider how the words total eclipse equals 187, just like Society of Jesus, which is the secret society, most likely at the top of the ladder. And the society uses a logo that reminds us of an eclipsed sun, and Society of Jesus equals 187 as well. Using the standard 26-letter alphabetic order, Cristiano Ronaldo equals 187. And Cristiano Ronaldo, just thinking here, he plays for Manchester United now. He was just transferred, I think, some point last year. Let me see when. Forgive me for getting sidetracked here, but August 27th, 2021. I just want to see if this is connected. Let's see. When was this in the news again? This was So we do get 33 weeks. Looks like 33 weeks in 3 days. Interesting. So we all know that Jesus was crucified at the age of 33, allegedly, in the year 33 AD. The phrase crucifixion of Jesus Christ equals 303, a lot like Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, 303. So this happening 33 weeks and 3 days after getting sent to Manchester United is a big deal. So this story is connected to twins. And, of course, right now, we are in a significant period of time between the two great American twin eclipses, creating an X over the United States. And when we talk about these twin eclipses and this code, probably the most significant number is 1331. Notice how Jesus the Messiah equals 1331. 1331 eclipse equals 1331. And this is the year that the Black Death Plague began, the year 1331, over in Asia. And consider how we got a new plague between these two great American eclipses. And they even called it the coronavirus. And the corona is just the name of the atmosphere of the sun, which is visible only during a total eclipse. The 1331 eclipse, which is the longest total eclipse in the history of recorded canon, to only cross over land, was on November 30th. November 30th of 1331, and that's the only date that sums to 1331. And now we're in a period between the two twin eclipses, and twin eclipses equals 1331. Well, let me show you how Cristiano Ronaldo is coded to the number 1331. If we take his full name and plug it in the calculator, we get 1987. And of course, this is a lot like a year, right? Well, Ronaldo was not born in 1987. He was born in 1985. However, if we measure from his birthday to the year 1987, we get exactly 1 year, 331 days, representing the number 1331. When you write out 1331 in this same cipher, it has the same value as twins, 1139. 1331 equals 233 in ordinal. The first Great American Eclipse was on the 233rd day of the year. And now Ronaldo has died exactly 23 months and 3 weeks before the second Great American Eclipse. In regards to this 1139, I saw several headlines say that it was his newborn son who died. And notice how newborn son equals 139. Well, his partner, Georgina Rodriguez, who gave birth to the twins, allegedly, was a span of exactly 10,309 days old on the date of this news. On top of that, this story also fell 139 days after the anniversary of the 1331 eclipse. However, if we instead measure to the last total solar eclipse that occurred back in December of 2021, this story fell 135 days later. Notice how the name Cristiano equals 135. It also sums to 108, which is the same as twin boy. And this news was on the 108th day of the year, April 18th. 108, a very significant number to the eclipse code based on the geometry of the Earth, Moon, and Sun. Twin boy also equals 81 in reverse, and this story fell 81 days after the birthday of Georgina Rodriguez. Now, the 108th day of the year also leaves 257 days on the calendar. The phrase total solar eclipse is 257, just like blood sacrifice. Cristiano Ronaldo's full name in English and he does play soccer in England right now. Notice how his full name connects to this 257, right? However, in the Fibonacci method, Ronaldo's full name sums to 2,043, and this news story fell 243 weeks after the first Great American Total Solar Eclipse. Now, there's more to unpack. We'll look again at the Gematria of sacrifice, 73, just like ritual sacrifice, 73. And in that Fibonacci method, the name Ronaldo equals 703. And on the date of this news story, Ronaldo was 37 years and 73 days old. 703, the 37th triangular number. Now, the 73rd triangular number is 2701. And 2701 is the Hebrew Gematria of the very first verse of the Bible, which is 37 times 73, all connecting to Ronaldo's age. So a strong biblical riddle, ending with the New Testament, the crucifixion of Jesus, tracing all the way back to Genesis 1:1. This is how they do it. Finally, the date numerology of this news story had perfect overlap with the gematria of the word kill. 44, 17, 64, 28, and even 19 in Hebrew. Don't forget, Hebrew gematria, if you really want to learn more about words and names, it never hurts to check the Hebrew language. Oops. I didn't mean to search for trans. I meant to search for translate.google.com. Here we go. And in Hebrew gematria, check this out, the word smoke. When you plug this into the Hebrew gematria cipher, check out how the word for smoke equals 420. This is an appropriate find for today, April 20th, which is known as the pot day, right? 420. A lot of people think that 420 is the time at which you get high, but I strongly believe that this has something to do with it. Just very simple. Look at the word smoke. There you have it. Okay, so heading into the last part of this video here, this is my favorite decode of the week, and it's connected to a riddle that I saw ahead of time, so to speak. So just to recap, back on April 15th, I made this post mentioning how there were huge Jackie Robinson alignments for this particular Jackie Robinson Day. Now, for those of you who don't know, every year in Major League Baseball, they celebrate Jackie Robinson Day. This is the man who broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball, which ended segregation. And this year was the 76th season of integrated baseball between races. 76 is an interesting number because in reduction, Jackie Robinson Day equals 76. He came from the Negro Leagues. Notice how Negro equals 76. And when Jackie Robinson made his debut in Major League Baseball, it was on a date with alternate numerology of 76. Back in 2013, notice how the word racism equals 213. In the year 2013, a film called 42 came out. 42 being the number that Jackie Robinson wore. In this film, Robinson was portrayed by actor Chadwick Boseman, who was born in the year 76. Well, in the year 2020, Chadwick Boseman died on a date with 76 numerology, and it happened to be the exact same day that Jackie Robinson Day was being celebrated in Major League Baseball. Of course, that holiday was delayed in 2020 because of the pandemic. Now, this year, on Jackie Robinson Day, Jackie's old team, the Dodgers, played against the Cincinnati Reds, and the Reds won the World Series in the year 76. This year's Jackie Robinson Day was connected especially to Chadwick Boseman, who died a span of 19 months and 19 days before this year's holiday. 1919 is interesting because that's the year that Jackie Robinson was born. And notice how the name Robinson equals 361. That's the same gematria as Gottfried. And just 3 days before Jackie Robinson Day, Gilbert Gottfried died in the city of Brooklyn, New York. And Jackie Robinson played for the Brooklyn Dodgers. 361 is 19 times 19. Robinson made his Major League debut in the year 47. And this year's Jackie Robinson Day was exactly 470 weeks after the release of the film 42. The name Robinson summing to 47. The current coach of the Dodgers is named Roberts, which is somewhat similar to the name Robinson. And notice how Dave Roberts was born in the year 72, which is the same year that Jackie Robinson died, 72. 72, a pretty important number to the Dodgers. Dodgers equals 72. Now, on Jackie Robinson Day this year, Dave Roberts won his 547th game for the Dodgers. And that's a very important number to Los Angeles, California, which sums to 547. The name Roberts even equals 547 in English gematria. So this was an alignment I picked up ahead of time, and I don't really encourage sports betting on this channel. Anybody familiar with my work knows that. But that's more on a day-to-day basis. Like, if you're looking for connections, you're going to find them. You're going to find a reason to bet on a team. But riddles like this run way deeper. And indeed, the Dodgers did win this day against the Reds, getting Dave Roberts' 547th victory. Also, this year's Jackie Robinson Day was exactly 18,070 days after Jackie Robinson died. Negro League equals 187, but again, the number 187 is that homicide code in the state of California where the Dodgers now play. So in this post, I said, hey, we're probably going to get some sort of news story connected to all of this, right? There has to be like a hoax or some sort of media frenzy connected to this. And tell me what you guys think. Just a couple minutes after I finished this post, I checked the news, and I found that we had a police shooting in the state of Kansas. Now, Jackie Robinson played 1 year in the Negro Leagues, and he played for the Kansas City Monarchs. So I understand that Kansas City is in Missouri, and this shooting was in Kansas, but it is Kansas City. This police shooting was on 122nd Street. And notice how Kansas City equals 122 in gematria. The governor of Kansas had been in office for 1,187 days, kind of connected to this 187 number. This was also 76 days after Kansas's date of statehood. And, of course, Jackie Robinson Day summing to 76. So perhaps there was a connection to that news story, right? That might be a stretch. I'll give you guys that. But what's not a stretch is that the very next day, a woman was murdered in Queens. And look where her body was found. Jackie Robinson Parkway. I mean, what are the odds of this? So, for the rest of this video, I want to talk about this news story about the death of Orsalia Gal. And this has really dominated the media over the past few days. And it's a very bizarre story where this woman went out, she came home, even though she had an advanced security system, someone still murdered her in her house somehow and then dragged her body in a duffel bag several blocks. And we're told that the police were able to trace the blood back to her house, and that's who they figured out where she lived. There's been a lack of evidence of that. Of course, I don't expect them to show a bloody sidewalk, but a lot of strange things going on with this story. And what I want to talk about is how this is a numeric riddle connected to the lineage of queens of Hungary. And I want you to think about this for a second, right? So this story comes out of Queens, New York. This week, in fact, tomorrow, is the birthday of Queen Elizabeth of England. And by virtue of being born in 1926, she'll be 96 years old tomorrow. In the reverse alphabetic order, Queens, New York sums to 96. So I thought there has to be a connection to the Queen here. Now, the woman who died in this story was named Orsolya Gal, and both of those names are decisively Hungarian. Using prime numbers, the name Orsolya Gal equals 416, which is the date that she died. We're told that she was 51 years old. Hungarian equals 51, so does sidewalk. The name of her husband in this story was Howard Klein, and the name Klein equals 51. So I thought, this is interesting, right? Queen Elizabeth, definitely something here, but there's a clear Hungarian theme. And I don't remember when I read this. It was like a couple years ago, but I remembered the story of about a queen named Elizabeth of Hungary. Her name was Elizabeth of Luxembourg, and she was not the official queen of Hungary, but she was the queen consort, married to Albert II of Germany. And what made her so interesting in regards to all of the other queens and queen consorts named Elizabeth is that she died at the age of 33 due to a suspected poisoning. And the man who was suspected of poisoning her died in 1444. And using triangular numbers, the number 33 equals 1444. And again, Elizabeth of Luxembourg, the queen consort of Hungary. See this here? For a couple of years. And this whole story with Elizabeth of Luxembourg is a really interesting one in history, because what this saw was the end of the reign of the House of Habsburg. So forgive me while I bump around here, but so Elizabeth of Luxembourg was the daughter of Sigismund, who had no sons. So she ended up taking over the throne. However, when her husband, Albert II, died, she did not yet have a son. But she was pregnant. So this led to a dispute about who would take over the throne in Hungary. Would it be Elizabeth's unborn son, or would it be Vladislav III of Poland? Both Vladislav III and Elizabeth's son Ladislaw the Posthumous were coronated on the same day. So they were like dueling kings, and a war broke out, a civil war in Hungary about who would take over the throne. Now, that war was marred by the deaths of both of these people. Elizabeth poisoned at the age of 33, and Vladislaw ended up dying 2 years later in battle. And after the death of Vladislaw, Elizabeth's son, Ladislaw the Posthumous, ended up taking the throne. However, Ladislaw ended up dying at the very young age of 17. And it was suspected that he was poisoned as well. So I thought it was interesting that in this news story, the killer said your whole family is next, right? Which kind of harkens back to this story where the family continued to get poisoned after this. When Elizabeth of Luxembourg died, she was 12,126 days old. A lot like the number 126. Check out the name Orsolya Gal in this story, how it sums to 126. The date she died had numerology of 62 and 26. These are numbers that connect to the word queen, 62 and 26. The current Queen of England, Elizabeth II, equals 106. And the date of this news story was the 106th day of the year. It was also the 16th day of the month, connecting to Elizabeth of Luxembourg, which sums to 1600. Now, for anyone who's doubting that this story is connected to Elizabeth of Luxembourg, this should pretty much blow you out of the water. We start with the headline of this story, actually, which gives us this curious number of 330 in reduction. And of course, the number 33 is always stamped on fake news stories or Masonic hoaxes of the sort. This story happened in Queens, New York, which equals 33. And even the state of New York equals 33. The agency involved with recovery of the body here was the NYPD, and the police department was 330 days after its anniversary on the date of this story. Police equals 33 in reduction. So you'll notice that there are no more queens of Hungary in this current present day. There has been no Queen of Hungary since the year 1918. The last Queen of Hungary was Zita of Bourbon-Parma, and she lived all the way until the year 1989. Well, if you measure from her death, March 14th, 1989, to the date of this news story, you get exactly 33 years and 33 days. The name of the family whose lineage became queen was the Habsburg family. Notice how Habsburg equals 33, and to this day it's Karl von Habsburg who was the head of the House of Habsburg. Now, even though there are no more queens of Hungary, there are still women who are called the Queen of Hungary just in a titular fashion, right? They're not actually the queen, but they are called as such. Well, the last woman to hold this role was Francesca Thyssen, who used to be the wife of Karl von Habsburg. And on the date of this news story, she would have begun her 3,333rd week since birth. In fact, Hungary's national holiday is celebrated on March 15th, which was a span of 33 days before this news story. Consider how this is connected to Queen Elizabeth, whose mom, the Queen Mother, died on the date March 30th, which is written 3/30, a lot like 33. In fact, in the language of Gematria, Queen Mother has the same Gematria as 33. We're even told that the Queen Mother died at 1515 Universal Time. Well, notice how 33 equals 1515 in English Extended Gematria. In this story about a murder, the woman's name is Orsolia, which equals 33. And notice how the name Orsolia has perfect overlap with masonry, which also equals 33. And again, the highest degree of masonry said to be the 33rd. Elizabeth of Luxembourg's son, Ladislaw, was coronated as king on May 15th, the same day that her nemesis, Vladislav of Poland, also laid claim to the throne, May 15th. Well, May 15th is written 515. And when you write out 33 using prime numbers, it equals 515. Vladislav, his reign would go until 1444 when he died. And as I mentioned, 33 equals 1444 in trigonal gematria. So Elizabeth of Luxembourg was poisoned at the age of 33. Not only that, but she was a span of 74 days after her birthday. And this brings us to the element arsenic. On the periodic table, arsenic is the 33rd element. This is the most poisonous element on the table. And arsenic has an average weight of 74. So how appropriate for this woman who got poisoned to die by these exact numbers. Now, when you write out arsenic in gematria, arsenic has a value of 33. Now, notice how arsenic also sums to 69 in the alphabetic order, and this is another significant number here. Elizabeth of Luxembourg was the only offspring of Sigismund, who was the Holy Roman Emperor, in addition to being King of Hungary. Sigismund died at the age of 69, and the name Sigismund equals 690 in Sumerian Gematria. 69 also the value of Queen Elizabeth. I think there was one other 69 here. Yeah, there was. So, the first Queen Elizabeth, Elizabeth I, of course, now we're on Elizabeth II. Well, the first Elizabeth was born in the year 33, and then she died at the age of 69. This news story fell 6 months and 9 days after the birthday of Elizabeth of Luxembourg. It was also 247 days before the anniversary of her death. And in ordinal gematria, Elizabeth of Luxembourg equals 247. Now, the numbers 33 and 69 are familiar to the eclipse code. The word eclipse equals 33 and 69. And the name of this woman's husband, here in the news story, was Howard Klein. I guess Howard's not mentioned in here, but the name Howard also has this gematria, 69 and 33. Notice how both Elizabeth of Luxembourg and Sigismund of Luxembourg both equal 103 in reduction. This news story broke exactly 103 weeks before the second Great American Total Solar Eclipse. And it's even been 103 years since the nation of Hungary had a queen. Remember, the throne was made defunct. Sorry for bouncing around here on Wikipedia. But the Hungarian throne was defunct in 1918, which was 103 years ago. This is a number connected to ritual human sacrifice, 103. The city of Queens, New York also has excellent numbers for eclipse rituals, 192, 1895, 66, and 60. There's a few more interesting connections in here. The name Orsolya Gal, the victim here, her name equals 720 in Jewish gematria. And this is the name, the value of the name of her husband, Howard Klein, 720. Queens, New York, 720. Also, the name of the king who poisoned Elizabeth of Luxembourg, Vladislav, equals 720. So, I mean, this should really, beyond any shadow of a doubt, show us that the news is just ritual, numeric ritual. I mean, I would be very surprised if this woman really died by this code. That would be one hell of an organic synchronicity. You know, I was looking into how many people work for the New York Police Department, and it was something like 55,000 employees for NYPD, and 20,000 of those are non-uniformed officers. So with all those people on the staff, you know, it's certainly possible for them to run fake news stories out of that city. I don't have any doubt. All right, guys, just jumping into the chat here real quick before I go. Calculus asking about Putin having gematria of 666 and how I arrived at that. Let me show you how that works. Vladimir Putin, his full name is Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. In the alphabetic order, his name sums to 313 and 389 reverse. These are the same numbers as 600, 6, 313, and 389. When you write out 666, it's 57, just like triple sixes, 57. And Vladimir Putin took office on May 7th, the date written 5/7. That happened, of course, in 2012 when I think wasn't the world supposed to be ending in 2012? Of course, that's what they told us. Oh, somebody asking about Columbine. That's interesting. Today is, of course, the 23rd anniversary of the Columbine shooting. And I want to make it very clear to everybody that those of you who were like me, who were in school watching the Columbine shooting unfold, we were subjected to an experiment of psychological trauma. And I invite anyone to go back and watch all of that footage from Columbine. There was definitely trickery going on that day. And the best evidence that I saw was when the police were dragging a dummy over a walkway in front of students as they were escaping the school. And the object they were dragging was very, very obviously a dummy. And Columbine is one of the many reasons why I'm running this channel right now. Because I grew up in a world that I knew was full of lies. The school that I went to, just like virtually every other school in America, wasn't trying to teach us anything. It was trying to teach us how to grow to be a good slave. And it was teaching us to get used to living in fear for our entire lives. Over the generations, this started at a younger and younger age. And by the time I was in high school, actually I was in 8th grade at the time of the shooting, but I was getting all excited to go to high school, and then suddenly we get this shooting, right? And I remember the first anniversary of the Columbine shootings at the school I went to, it was at least like a third of the kids didn't show up. And that's how scared people were. And, you know, these tactics still being used to this day, still being used in the news, you know, telling people not to leave their house or some random guy is going to come up and murder you and drag you across the sidewalk. So, did Columbine happen? You know, I'm not going to call the entire thing a hoax because I don't have that level of knowledge. But it was a staged operation, I have no doubt. You know, whether those two boys actually shot anybody, maybe they were triggered through MK Ultra programming, who knows? But yeah, this is part of the fear matrix we all live in. Well, shout out to Meme, who's, I guess maybe he's upset that I don't have 1,000 likes on this video. Yeah, I don't really get 1,000 likes on my videos. This work is always suppressed. Some people think my work is boring in the Gematria community. And for anyone who thinks that, it's pretty simple. They're just bored by good numerology. You know, I'm not the biggest personality in the community. But, yeah, if you want to learn about numerology and what's going on with these news stories, this is a great place to do it. And because of that, this channel will never get promoted by YouTube again. It used to be back in 2018. If you look way back at my videos on, like, XXX Tentacion and Anthony Bourdain, those videos are up in hundreds of thousands of views. And this information was spreading like wildfire at the time. And Gematria and the increased cleanliness of how Gematria was being taught on YouTube is a huge reason why we got rushed censorship in the mainstream. All right, so apologies if I missed any good questions in the chat. I wasn't really looking, just trying to get through all these decodes today. Shout out to Bobby, of course, who sent me an eerie message a couple days ago. But there he is back again. Good to see. All right, guys. Well, that'll do it for this live stream. Thanks to everybody for jumping in, whether you're watching live or archived. Feel free to comment, like, share, subscribe. You guys know the drills for truth channels here on YouTube. Anything you can all do helps. Peace, love, God bless, and we will talk to you next time. See ya.